You know, in most videos, I normally have a pretty good idea on like how I'm going to do the project I'm planning to do. Today is not one of those days. I am purely running on the idea of how hard could it be? Hello and welcome back to the series where I take my favorite Minecraft YouTuber builds and bring them into the real world using my amateur diorama making skills. Yep, it's hard work, but someone's gotta do it. But this time, I'm attempting to make an entire MegaBase. Because today, I'm going to be bringing GeminiTay's Season 9 base to the real world. Now, for those of you who remember the green diorama I made, that took over a month, and that was a starter base. So how in the world am I going to make an entire MegaBase? Well, I'm glad you asked, because now we have the power of technology. I love that just the whole camera shook when I put that down. I have been bestowed upon an old 3D printer, which I think means that hypothetically this will just now do all the work for me. The problem? How do I get stuff from Minecraft to the printer? I guess there's only one way I can find out. Time to head to the Hermitcraft Season 9 world download. And here we are. Wow, it looks so cool. I know that we're working on a project right now, but this is my first time looking at the world download, so we're going to do a quick exploration montage. Whoa. Wow. Oh, wow. Wow. Whoa. Ooh. Ooh. No, it's still there! Okay. And finally, we reach the soup group, which is also the location of our goal. And oh my gosh, the soup group spaces are just so pretty. Now, there's a ton of incredible bases on the server, but I think Gems is going to be the perfect one for this project for a couple of reasons. I mean, first off, obviously, this is an absolutely gorgeous base. Gem truly has mastered this elven build style, and it's honestly everything that I strive to achieve one day. But the big reason is that this is a 360 round base that looks good from all angles, and has one main structure that I can focus on. So something like Impulse's base, while super impressive, is not going to be the best for this project because it's built into something. And for Pearl's base, her base is incredible, but where it thrives is the fact that it's a built-in environment that meshes so well together and doesn't focus on one thing, which probably isn't going to translate the best to the miniature I want to make. So that's why today I'm only going to be focusing on Gem's castle. Of course, the village is adorable, but I think for this, we're just going to have to focus on one thing. So how exactly do I take this out of Minecraft? Oh gosh, I'm going to die. The whole flying and talking thing is a lot harder than I thought. Luckily, someone has made just the tool that is designed to export Minecraft worlds as 3D objects, which can eventually be turned into 3D print files. This is a program called Mineways. Mineways is a free open source program that was made specifically to be able to select an area of any Minecraft world and export it for either rendering or 3D printing. And since we have the Season 9 world download, that means I'm able to upload that, go and find Gem space, and select the area that I want to export, which I'm going to be selecting export for render. I know that it literally says export for 3D printing, but that packages in a way that's specifically meant to send it off to another company to print. Plus, it gives an estimate on how much it would cost. So yeah, not doing that. So instead, we're just going to import the OBJ object into Blender, a free 3D modeling program which I just barely remember how to use. And here we can see the mega build straight out of Minecraft. Look, we can even see the inside of Impulse's base down here. This is definitely a good first step because it shows that this is something that's possible. The only problem now is that a lot of the examples I've seen are a lot more simple builds. Not exactly mega bases, so even though we have the model, I know it's going to be just a ton of work to get it ready for print. And I do not know the first thing of what to do. Heck, I've never even 3D printed anything before. I don't even know if the 3D printer I have works yet. Thinking about that, I should probably test it out now. As I said before, this is a used 3D printer that one of my friends was selling for pretty cheap because they were moving, but I did have to make sure to clean it first because it has a little bit of residue left over from the last time it printed. There are two main types of commercial 3D printers, one that prints by using plastic filament, and then ones that print by using resin, which this one is, which works by taking the resin and exposing it in a specific shape and building up layer by layer until you get your final print. First thing I'm printing is specifically designed to test the exposure to make sure everything is working properly. It is semi-concerning that this one small print is like 2 hours, so I really wonder how long this whole project is going to take. I guess the good thing about this is that I can just kind of like set it and forget it, but I guess the other downside to that is like if it fails or something and I don't notice for like a few hours, that's just wasted time. But who knows? We'll see how the final result goes.
2 hours later.
Oh no, that does not look good. That don't look right at all. Luckily, the test print did actually end up succeeding. There was just some old resin that ended up becoming whatever this was. I don't have a scraper, but I do have a Bell's Outlet rewards card, so hopefully that will work. One of the negatives about printing with resin is the fact that resin itself is pretty toxic, so you have to be really careful not to touch any resin until it's been completely cleaned and cured. Luckily, I was also given a machine that does just that, by first cleaning it in a whirlpool of rubbing alcohol to clean off any excess resin on the print. Then it can be turned into a curing station, where I'll use the power of the sun, or at least like 6 UV light bulbs, and now the print is finally ready. I know, not the most exciting first print to start off with, but it was a good way to learn the process. And also, based on the results of the prints, I was able to adjust my settings, so hopefully there will be less print failures in the future. I think it would be a good idea to test another pre-made file, just to make sure that it works. So I had this really cute idea for another test print, which honestly I really want to try and may or may not be for my own personal gain, but also very thoughtful. Look at these adorable little 3D planters that people make. You got Animal Crossing, you got Pokemon. I found this adorable little Snorlax one that was only like $1 for the file. But I may also need a late Christmas gift for one of my friends, so he's getting a Pokemon Snorlax. Honestly, what a good friend I am. The main thing I wanted to practice this time is using a program called Chutabox, at least I think that's how it's pronounced, because this print is going to need supports, so this will go ahead and generate that, and then go ahead and slice the file from print. I don't know how much resin to actually add, and Snorlax is a big boy. Layer 1 of 1,960, 10.5 hours to go. A small price to pay for a large son. It's like halfway, and you can just barely see his little feetsies above the surface. 10 hours later, I was happy to report that our Snorlax was in fact intact. Now I just need to remove the supports. Oh, I'm afraid to break him. The boy is free. Then after a quick wash and a little sun bath, you spin me right round, baby, right round. Now we had our boy. There obviously was a little bit of a shift in the plate, which caused this little dent, but overall, I'm really impressed. And to be a little bit extra, I ended up painting him to look like stone, using some Mod Podge and some paints and baking soda. I'm just now realizing the amount of power this 3D printer has given me, because this is adorable. But we are not here to print Pokemon, we are here to print Minecraft. Okay, I know that I keep on saying this, but I think I want to do one more test print. You know, just like a smaller build to get the process down of getting something from Minecraft to the printer, you know, without it being an entire MegaBase. So I'm going to actually go find another build that I can use as a smaller test print. I should probably also mention that someone else actually did do a 3D print of Decked Out before, which kind of also gave me the idea for doing this one, but they also had a way different printer than mine, so it's hard to learn from theirs. Okay, back to finding a build test print. You know, so probably something from like the shopping district or maybe a starter base would probably be good. Nothing too big or too complicated. Or I could do Scarland Castle. Oh no, I need to print Scarland Castle. Okay, yeah, this is probably a really bad idea. You know, very much a simple, small build. Although technically, if I only do the castle, it won't be an entire mega build, will it? Even though it's probably a mega base by itself, but I can't get the idea of having my own little miniature Scarland Castle out of my head, alright? And honestly, it's pretty isolated by itself, so it should be pretty easy to select in Mindways and just transfer over to Blender. I might hate myself for this, but how hard could it be? Famous last words, I'm sure. Okay, so first step is probably going to be heading into Mindways and selecting the Scarland Castle. I was able to adjust the height so it matched up with the base layer so I wouldn't get any of the environments around it. And when I import it into Blender, we just have our castle. Now, I thought it'd be kind of fun to make it look like one of those Cinderella castle figurines. So I brought in a cylinder and scaled it to be one of a base for the castle. And I also wanted to add a plaque, so I hopped into Illustrator and started basically ripping off the Scarland logo. Please do not tell the Scarland lawyers on me. I was then able to make the SVG file 3D, and we have our little Scarland figurine that's good to bring into the slicer. And from here, I think I just have to scale it to size to the build plate, and auto-generating supports worked last time, so let's try that again. And just in case, I was recommended to do a last step of checking for islands, because apparently if you have any of those, it's a high likelihood that your print would just like fail. Oh. 42. Oh, this is going to be more difficult than I thought. I'm really glad that I decided to do a smaller test model first from a Minecraft world because I'm genuinely learning so much. So what I'm having problems with is that the interior is creating so many islands that need to have supports individually placed for them. These little areas right here, when they print, they're not going to be attached to anything and they'll just stick to the bottom of the printer. So I have to find the individual layer and then go over here and find the shape and then add a support so it won't do that. If you don't get these islands, it's going to cause a bunch of just loose cured resin that's going to cause the print to fail, and also might damage your machine. The bright side of this is that I'm learning that I should have done a lot more prep beforehand, so I wouldn't have to go and do this now. Oh well, a good lesson learned for the next one. While I struggled to figure out how to prep that model for print, let me tell you about this video's sponsor, Milanote. I'm super excited to be working with Milanote because to me, it's like the ultimate organization tool for creative projects, which I've already been using for a while now. You've even seen it in projects here on the channel. When I was working on the Prismarine Palace, and when I started planning my competition cosplay, which I'm still working on. It got pushed back a little bit, but it's still happening. I even used it to collect inspiration for my Minecraft builds. And of course, also this very project. Starting off, I started by breaking down the project, and was able to gather a bunch of resources and tutorials in one place so I wouldn't have to keep on tracking them down every time. I created a mood board for inspiration for the final composition, as well as painting techniques. And as the project continued, I was able to expand by adding more notes and reference images, and it just allowed me to stay organized in a visual way that just flowed so naturally to me. There are over 100 different templates to help you get started, or you can start from scratch to make the perfect board for your unique project. If you're working on a group project, Milanote is fantastic because you're able to easily invite and collaborate with others and get feedback and comments in real time. Plus, with the Milanote app, you can easily access your boards and add quick notes while you're on the go. And best of all, Milanote is available for free with no time limit. You can sign up right now by using the link in the description and get started on your next creative project. Alright, so it took a bit of time, but I finally got all the islands and it is no longer giving me any error codes, so I was able to send it off to print. So I set it to print and then went to work with fingers crossed that I wouldn't fail by the time I get home, and I was so relieved to see that the print in fact did succeed. After spending so much time so up close in this model, it was kind of funny to see it at this scale. I don't think I realized just like how small this model was going to be. And then it had a new problem of not wanting to get off the build plate. After a little bit of struggle, I finally did get it to release.
Oh, it's coming loose.
Luckily it did not immediately break after 10 hours of printing, and I just had to remove the supports, and then after a quick cleaning and curing, this was the final results. I was genuinely so impressed with the amount of detail that I was able to print. And it's so cool that I now have something physically in my hands that was mostly designed and made in Minecraft. And now I think we are finally ready to take on the MegaBase. You know, like the main project of this video, which I'm just now starting like 12 minutes into the video. Oh boy, can't wait to see the retention on this one. But now with my little 3D printing training complete, this should be a lot easier to bring this to life. If I just jumped headfirst into this, it definitely would have been way more in a struggle to do this whole thing. But now that I semi have a process down, it really should be a lot easier. Right?
1 week later.
It was a struggle. So it's been a week and it has been a journey. I don't know if people care or want to hear about the journey. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you anyway because I need people to know how absurd this whole process ended up being. So the first issue that I needed to figure out before I could even think about start printing is that I had to figure out a way to remove all the interior in the MegaBase, because that's where all the main issues came when printing out Scarland Castle. Plus, I recently figured out that apparently having all these tiny little rooms create these things called resin traps, where you get these little pockets of uncured resin that have the potential to just split open your model. So it is completely possible that one day I am just going to find Scarland Castle exploded. So to avoid that, I'm just going to print the entire thing solid, meaning I need to get rid of the interior. Which is honestly such a shame because Gem's interiors are so freaking adorable. But luckily it looks like MindWays had a solution for this. They had a few settings to fill in air bubbles and seal off entrances, so theoretically that should make it export as solid. Gotta love it when there's apparently just a magic little button to fix all your problems. So I got to work filling in all the entrances and the windows, that way it would know what was inside and what was outside. And now with those settings checked, I exported my model, but to my surprise, the interior was still there, which was a little suspicious. Okay, maybe it's a big base, maybe I missed an entrance somewhere, but let me just test it on a smaller section first, just to make sure everything works. As you can see by my multiple attempted test files, I went double checked, followed all the directions I found on MindWays, but still wouldn't get rid of the interior. So my next step of logic is if I couldn't get the program to fill it with glass for me, I could fill it with sand, thus making it a solid build. At least that's the logic that went on in my head. And while doing this, I found so many etho heads. Gem, how many etho heads you got in here? I know he's washed out, but this is a bit much. And now full of sand, I once again exported and hoped that it would maybe close in the gaps, thus making it solid. But no, the interior was still there, but now there was also sand. Okay, so I can't fix this issue in Minecraft, and I can't figure out how to fix it in MindWays. But maybe I can fix the model after I've exported to Blender. Maybe that's where I can find a magic button and I can just like fix everything. There's no magic button. Any tool or setting that I even attempted to use that was meant to fix some things for 3D printing would just crash. Because this is a Minecraft model, not meant for 3D printing. And honestly, at this point, it was looking like the only way that I could remove the interior was to go and do it by hand, which I really didn't want to do. At this point, I was considering abandoning Gem's base. Honestly, Mumbo's base was looking pretty tempting. It would save me a lot in resin. No interior, no exterior either. But finally, I decided to open up the file in UV Editor, which upon opening, I found out that it had a solidify button just right there that would just go and fill in any air bubbles. I found the magic button. I mean, yeah, I have to convert it from 5 programs in order to get to that button, but I found the button. Okay, that was all problem number 1. Here's problem number 2. Yeah, we're not done. Which is the fact that whenever I export the model, it's also exporting out part of the chunks around it. So in order to get the composition that I wanted, I needed to remove all the terrain around the castle. Luckily, this problem I could solve right in Minecraft by using World Edit. So the best way that I figured out how to do this was to use the move down tool and basically create a gap around the edge of the castle. And then I could start going and start chipping away at all the rest of the terrain around it. There's probably an easier way. This is the way that worked for me. The next step was going and thickening up the tree leaves because, well, the leaves look great in Minecraft. All the floating blocks wouldn't really translate to our real world physics too well, so I went and I just made sure that everything was cohesive and connected. The last step was sealing off the bottom layer so I could solidify the model later. And now with the isolated castle, I was able to export it and bring just it into Blender. And once in Blender, I could now sculpt a new landscape base for it. That way I could add in a little bit of the landscape back, but make it look like I didn't just cut a chunk out of Minecraft. Now with our area sculpted out, it's looking a little bit too smooth, so we're able to go and add a blocky modifier to it, and we're able to actually scale up and down how detailed we want it to look. And after a little bit more tweaking, we finally had the final composition of the model. So to recap what I have to do to these models, I have to export from Minecraft using MineWaves into an OBJ object, and once I was in Blender, I did a little bit of editing. I was able to export as a STL, and once I brought the STL into Chutabox, I was then able to bring over to UV Editor, which I was then able to solidify the model and save back as a Chutabox file. So quite simple, really. If you're someone who's trying to follow along with this video to figure out how to print your own model, I'm so sorry. But still, we cannot print the model yet, because the way that the model is right now, we are still very limited on how big of a scale we can print this at. I wasn't about to go and do all this work to only be able to print something that's like 2 inches wide. So in order to print this scaled up version, I have to go and split the model into different parts that will fit on the print tray. Which again, no magic button to do this. So I then had to bring it back into Blender, and I had to figure out the best way to separate this build into sections. To separate them, I had to basically draw planes where I wanted them to separate, which I was then able to use the boolean tool to separate at the plane, which at the end I ended up with a model that was separated like this. But then I brought it back into the slicer and realized that I needed to slice one more piece just like a little bit in order to get it to the scale that I wanted. But then the file broke and I couldn't make that small slice anymore. So I had to redo and slice everything one more time. But finally, after all that, after a week of working on this, I had the file for my model to print. You know, normally working on my projects, at the end, I'm normally like, oh, there were some challenges, but it's really fun figuring and working through it. This is not one of those times. There was no fun had here. Don't get me wrong, I am happy with the final product. I feel very accomplished that I was able to figure out this whole process, but it was just essentially a week full of trial and error, and it was just mostly frustrating. Normally on my projects, I can just use hot glue and creativity to solve my problems. This one was just so technical and I had to find a specific way to do things, but alas, we can get into printing and bringing this MegaBase to the real world. Starting tomorrow, because right now I am very tired. Alright, it's time to get printing. So this ended up being a total of 6 different parts I needed to print, so I knew this was going to take a few days. The first one, starting off strong, that took a total of 10 hours to print. But for the most part, came out pretty good. Feeling pretty confident, I moved into the next print, only to have it fail immediately after 2 hours. Great, only 2 prints in and was immediately humbled. A few adjustments to my settings later, and we were back on track. Another 9 hours done, and a lot more hours to go. While these did take hours to print, it only really required me to remove the supports and then cleaning and curing the model, so 30 to 40 minutes for each one. I started getting process down, but still, the build plate did not like me. It's been over
24 hours of printing. Still 2 more prints to go, but it's almost there.
It really wasn't as bad as it sounds because I was able to leave this running overnight, so I was making progress while I was sleeping. But in total, it did take over 42 hours to print. After like 3 days of running this 3D printer, we finally have our 3D model, and it genuinely looks so freaking cool. After all the work I had to do to figure out how to get this to print, I am so happy with the way it turned out. And for the most part, the prints turned out so good with so much of the detail still intact. Not everything turned out as perfect as I would hope for, but honestly, I'll take it. On the first few prints that I did, there were some issues with the supports in the center of the bottom, so it caused the bottom to kind of warp a little bit. I did have some issues with some supports melding into the sides that were supposed to be flat, so it ended up causing a lot of issues and having to do a ton of sanding to be able to make sure that everything will fit correctly. Some sections fit together really well with a very minimal seam, and some sections not so much, especially on those that had the warping. In general, that was always going to be a risk the more parts I separated it into, so now it's time to take a little bit of super glue and put it all together. There were some seams in between the prints, but luckily due to the blocky nature, they weren't too noticeable. Well, except for that one. So I'm just going to fill it with air dry clay. Honestly, if it was in the front, I probably would have reprinted the piece, but since it's in the back, this is good enough. Now with everything assembled, we can get to painting, which started with a journey to the outside world for some priming. And now we have a version of Gem's base, but if it was a little goth. I decided to start with a darker primer even though her color palette is quite on the lighter side, just because since the scale of this is so small, I thought it'd be easier to start with all the shadows and then slowly build up the base color and highlights. Which is why I'm starting with the airbrush to put down the initial sandstone color. You know, I say all this like I know what I'm doing. I did a bunch of research beforehand, and apparently there's this whole subculture of painting specifically for miniatures, which I definitely did try my best, but for the most part, I was mostly just focused on not ruining the thing that I just spent 42 hours printing. So I was able to use the airbrush for the base coats for the castle and the tree, and then decided to move on to acrylic. The general overall feel I wanted this mini to have was realistic, but definitely have that Minecraft look to it. That's why the first color I ended up adding was for the dirt part of the grass blocks. I know sometimes things have to look bad before they get better, but I was getting kind of nervous at this point. I swear I could hear in the back of my head Gem's voice going, "Trust the process." And luckily, as soon as I started dry brushing on the green for the grass, it did start looking way better. Overall, dry brushing definitely was the best technique when it came to painting this. Mostly because I just wanted it to catch the highlights, and because it's so small, you can't put on the paint too thick or it's going to be like really noticeable. And finally, we get to add a little bit of color to this by adding the teal prismarine color.
Good so far. I'm actually pretty impressed. I think the base colors were going to be the easiest part because now I have to go in and do all the little details and all the little white and spruce borders around everything. And I feel like this is the part where it's going to be like most noticeable when I mess up. So now I must take my tiniest of brushes and see if I can not mess this up.
Ever so carefully, I started painting on the trim outline, and oh my gosh, I felt like my hands were shaking so much. For these, I was just going so slowly and trying so hard to focus and not go over the trim. And even though there was way less, this just took me so much longer than the base coat. So it was just one of those tedious tasks that you just gotta throw on a YouTube video or a podcast in the background while you do. Though honestly, it did become slightly relaxing at one point. Kind of like a paint by numbers. Though annoying, this definitely was the step that truly brought the whole paint job together, making everything look a bit more clean and really made the build pop. Honestly, I'm kind of proud of myself. Like, yeah, if you look pretty close up, it's kind of messy. Why are you looking that close, huh? Just back up a little bit. And before we add on the final piece of resistance and the last pop of color, there's one more thing we need to do. I want to try and add back in the river by making a water texture with a little bit of hot glue. What, did you think I was going to go through an entire project without using any hot glue? Whose channel do you think you're on? Using a clear hot glue stick was just a really quick and easy way to let gravity do most of the work and get a pretty simple water-like texture. And then to really add to that shine and fill in those in-between gaps, we add a little bit of Mod Podge. And originally I was going to 3D print a bunch of trees to put around the base, but all of them failed except for these, so they just go back here. And the very final step is to add our cherry blossom tree, and this mini MegaBase is finally done. I am so happy with the final product, and I hope that you had fun watching. If you so happen to stumble across this channel and want to see more videos like this, make sure to check out some of my other projects in real life and in Minecraft. And hey, I would love to know what you guys would like to see me make next, so make sure to leave that down in the comments, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!